So here we are, we're at our second session at the NASCA virtual conference. And so today what we are really going to focus on is the NASCA research. And so NASCA, we have been working on our research now for a couple of years, and we are so thoughtful to have our partners both at Accenture and at NeoGov, and our research and policies chair, Jason Jackson from the state of Nebraska, really diving into some of the toughest issues in the public sector. And so last year, we really spent a lot of time on talent acquisition, on workforce. And so one thing that we heard was that people wanted more on three big things. 1, training, 2, succession planning, and 3, performance evaluations. So that's what we're going to dive into a little bit more. We have spent a lot of time on last workforce research on talent acquisition. So now we're going to do training, performance evaluation, and succession planning. And I have 4 amazing panelists, amazing national thought leaders in this space with me today. So I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to get right to their questions. So first up, we have Drew Erdman. Drew Erdman is the Chief Operating Officer for the state of Missouri. They have been doing some amazing training in Missouri, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. Second, we have Laura Freed. Laura was appointed the director of the Department of Administration in Nevada. And so she has been there only since January. We're really excited to have her, one of our newest chief administrators and one of our newest members of the NASCA family. And then we also have Lisa Lagis. She is a managing director at Accenture. They have really been a thought leader partner in this and all the research that we've been doing. It's been very helpful to have their perspective of what's going on in HR around the country. And so we also have Bob Oglesby. Bob is a strategic advisor at NeoGov, also a former vice president of NASCA, so he has worn the state hat, the state chief administrator hat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them a series of questions, and we're going to get their perspective. So first up, I just want to do something, because one thing that we hear a lot about from our partners is we want to kind of humanize you and hear a little bit about who you are. So real quick, I'll go, this first one's going to go to Laura. Laura, just real quick, can you tell me something that you are reading right now or something that no one else knows about you, so that we learn a little bit more about Laura the person?
Oh, okay. Well, first, one thing I'm reading right now is right behind me. Hold on.
Yeah.
How to Lead in Times of Crisis. This is backwards, but it's something I actually saw at the store and bought on impulse. So I've been reading little, as I have time, little Harvard Business Review snippets of leading in a time of crisis. And something nobody knows about me, this is embarrassing, it's my secret shame. I enjoy a good ASMR video.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's perfect to learn a little bit more about you guys as leaders and as humans. So what about Drew? Something that you're reading or something that no one knows about you? And Drew, we can't hear you yet. Let's see. Oh, Drew, let's see. I can test Drew. I don't think we can hear you. Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, what I'm reading right now is Edmund Morris's 3-volume biography of Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm like halfway through, so right in the middle of volume number 2. So yeah, that's what I'm reading these days.
Thank you, Drew. All right, we'll go to Lisa, and then we'll go to Bob. So something no one knows about you or something you're reading.
Okay. Well, I just finished a novel, American Dirt. Very good story of folks migrating to the U.S. And one of the things, COVID-19, to just kind of get a new hobby, I guess, is I've started doing embroidery kits. And so I'm making a number of like embroidery pieces, and I'm going to put together a COVID wall in my new apartment.
Lots of new hobbies right now. Thanks for sharing that. And what about you, Bob, before we get into the content, something you're reading or something no one knows about you?
Let's see, am I live? Yeah.
You are live.
Well, I've just realized that this is a great format for me because, you know, those of you who do know me, I'm a giant. I'm 6'10", and so those of you who don't know me can't tell I'm that tall. So I really like that about this new format. I escape to fiction, mystery, murder books primarily, and I'm tired of not having new TV shows to watch, so I'm watching a lot of old BBC reruns.
Thanks to all my panelists for answering that question. I think you guys have been making really tough, hard decisions, and there's been a lot on your plate. So it's also very helpful to learn a little bit more about you. So now we're going to dive into our topic: training, succession planning, performance evaluations. So first up, I'm going to go to our two state members. I'm going to go to Laura, then I'm going to go to Drew. But let's kind of zoom out, super high level. What's been on your plate around public workforce, especially now that it's been the COVID implication? How has that changed? What has been the reaction from your staff? And so just big picture, kind of tell us workforce, what's going on and what's in your plate. We'll go to Laura first.
Okay. Big picture, how has COVID changed public sector work? Of all the things that the Department of Administration does, human resources, IT, public works, procurement, mail delivery, what's really risen to the top for us in a historic public health and fiscal crisis, was IT supported mass telework, honestly. Human resource management is important, and we've been making a lot of decisions and providing a lot of guidance to other departments, but it honestly, for at least at my level, took a backseat to some more immediate needs around IT. But specific to training and employee development, just as an example, we didn't have a statewide telework policy, just individual department policies, and that hasn't changed. Partly because I think there was an expectation all over the state workforce that the pandemic might be over in a few months, or at least the bad part of the lockdown. So you had comments at the federal level kind of setting some expectations like we'll be open by Easter, or the economy will be rocking and rolling by July. And so reorienting trainings and providing guidance on how to educate your staff when you don't see them every day was kind of going on in the background on an ad hoc basis. Whereas now I think people are settling into the idea that until there's a widely available vaccine, we're going to keep working like this. Fortunately, I think a lot of state government has took pretty quickly to using Teams for meetings and for check-ins and for sharing documents on SharePoint. And of course, the staggered in-person staffing to maintain physical distancing. And I think that was particularly true of the digital natives in our workforce. So you can't ignore the generational aspect of adapting to this. And of course, now the resurgent challenge is schools opening with at least part-time distance learning. So how do we continue productivity and yet be sensitive to the needs that our employees are balancing, which are many. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. A lot covered there.
Yeah.
What about the Missouri perspective? Same, different? Would love to hear from Drew.
A lot of it is similar themes, and in my role as COO, have purview across all 16 executive departments here. But one thing that we've tried to do, even in the midst of this challenge and at times tragic situation, is to view COVID not just as a disruptor of normal routines, but actually as an accelerant of change. And that this is a unique opportunity where, quite frankly, if you came to our leaders and you said in January, hey, we're going to have 40% of our state workforce working remotely in a matter of weeks, there would not have been one person who would take that bet, right? And even if I said in 2 years, I don't think I would have had someone take that bet. But that's what's happened here. And so in a very structured way, just as Laura said, there's the IT challenges, there's the moving remote, there's the emergency procurements for support, the whole set of things that we've had to do. I would emphasize safety is really top of mind across the board. But we are trying to view this at it is a cliche, but sometimes cliches are true, never let a good crisis go to waste. There is an opportunity here to drive some real fundamental change and quite frankly, a number of our leaders, when you step back, they admit that they were skeptical certain changes could ever be implemented, but their views have changed because of the realities of what has happened, and they've seen it. So it's not theoretical, they've seen it. And so we have seen teams operating in new, different ways. We've seen dispersed teams that are more productive than before. But when it comes to talent and recruiting, we've seen people accept the idea of, hey, we'll recruit someone for a certain role in St. Louis, and we'll never expect them to come and work in Jefferson City, when just literally a few weeks before, they never would have imagined it for that particular role, which we think is going to help accelerate the diversity of our leadership as well. And one thing I just note in a big picture sense, viewing this as an accelerant, not a disruptor, in Missouri, what we did is we had a very structured time in May where asked every single department down to every division within every department to have a very structured dialogue about what is the after action report so far, what are the lessons learned, and what are some of the permanent changes we want to make in how we run state government, even in the midst of this crisis. And so that identified a set of management priorities that we're actively driving on, not in a theoretical way, but we have a series of teams working to drive, fundamental change in how we do our work with very set guidelines in the coming weeks. So we're seizing this opportunity, settling in, and to Laura's point, what's the time frame? The way we approached this from the start was this is going to be 12 to 18 months. Many people didn't believe that, but it's going to be a minimum of 12 to 18 months, and so there's not going to be significant change going back to a quote-unquote normal. It is we're redefining how the state of Missouri works going forward.
Yeah, thank you so many, from both of you guys, so many amazing nuggets there. Just really accelerating change, seeing the opportunity, and both to Laura and Drew's point, setting the perspective that it wasn't a 3-month, but it was a long-term change, probably reshaping what government looks like. So now we're going to dive into training. And so this one, we're going to first go to Laura, and then we're going to go to Lisa. But Laura, what can states do to make virtual training, we're doing that here today, virtual online learning, a preferable practice? And are there certain trainings that are better virtually and some that were better in person?
So for Nevada, all of what you would call your compliance training, the stuff that everybody has to do, was already online. So when the lockdown came, what got canceled were the sort of high-touch interpersonal skills trainings, the leadership trainings that really benefit from a classroom setting. And so our Office of Employee Development has been reformatting that competency-based leadership training to be delivered via Zoom or Teams, and they're experimenting with Teams because we all have that, or at least most of us do. For the leadership classes, they're trying to keep participation small and run sessions several times online to help employees feel like they're getting a personal experience. And so we'll see how it works. I mean, we're sort of, this goes back to, these things were sort of happening in the background with the human resource management staff, but weren't top of mind governor's priorities, but settling into the idea. And I really appreciated Drew's point about, we're going to reshape state government because this is an opportunity. We'll see how the in-person stuff that develops the camaraderie that you need in your leadership workforce, we'll see how it rolls out. It may be that it's just better to do it in a classroom setting. So right now, I wish Nevada had some best practices to offer in those kind of, like I said, high touch types of trainings. So I'll be interested to hear what other states' experience with that is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Lisa, you work with states and localities all over the nation. What are you seeing in this space?
Well, I think to Laura's point, many states already had some form of online training for compliance, but for leadership and some of the softer skills, that's been traditionally held in person. So, we're certainly seeing an increase in the number of courses set up in small group settings one of the things that I've also seen is that a number of universities and content providers are now offering more types of courses to organizations, whether they're private or public, at lower costs and so forth, because they're really trying to increase uptick of training. Universities are facing a downturn in enrollment and so forth. So it's a good opportunity, I think, for states and localities to really, speak to those universities. Laura mentioned Harvard Business School. They're providing relevant training that many of our leaders can use now. And so I think the key thing is to find, solid, relevant training that can be done virtually. And these workshops and small group sessions are a great way to go about it. The other thing I would just add is, making training a priority will be another challenge for folks, because when you were taking training, you kind of blocked off your calendar and said, I'm going to be away at a conference for 2 days or 1 day or whatever it might be. It's going to be very important for us to still have that mindset to make sure that we do get out of our day-to-day jobs and really focus on, building our skills, breaking from the day-to-day so we can think more broadly and strategically about what we're doing as a workforce and as a company or as an organization.
Yeah, thank you so much for that perspective. I know even leading this virtual meeting right now, I was telling our team, you're still getting daycare calls, you're still having to step away, you're still getting emails. So really working on that solid virtual training is an amazing perspective. So we're going to stay on training, and we're going to go to Drew and Bob, kind of talking, actually Drew and Lisa. One form of training is around mentoring. And I know Drew has been really developing some strong leadership training in Missouri. So mentoring is a recognized training tool. More people are working virtually. How are you guys keeping that strong mentoring? And what can states do to keep mentees, mentoring, doing some of the high touch leadership training? So Drew, tell us about your training in Missouri and if you're doing any mentorship.
Sure, thanks very much. I'll hit a few highlights here and maybe afterwards give a link for folks to check things out. So without a doubt, look, it's a challenge. When it comes to the kind of high intensity, hands-on, that figurative, but oftentimes kind of the literal sense of being close to someone does make a difference for some of the kind of intense mentoring, without a doubt. How have we tried to tackle this? So we've had a number of programs already in the works, which has helped significantly, and I'll just highlight two. One is our Missouri Leadership Academy, which we've invested in. That's a very high-touch 6-month program. I personally lead it 2 to 3 days a month. And we went to a hybrid model. Some of it was in person, a lot of it was remote. Some of it was brought back together in person, socially distanced appropriately to manage that. And so we are continuing on, and one of the critical things that we did decide is I put before the cabinet, do we suspend this for a new class? And the resounding answer was no. And so we kicked off a new class just 2 weeks ago. So we're doing a hybrid model on that, and it is a work in progress. What I would say in more broadly, though, that's the intense kind of 30-person emerging leaders who will be the department leaders of the next 3 to 5 years. Across the board, we had a more end-to-end transformation of how we're developing all of our staff, all of our teammates in a partnership with Deloitte. Drove forward last year on updating what our program called Engage, which was centered upon, and this goes back a couple of years, centered upon the radical notion that supervisors should actually coach their staff and give them feedback on a regular basis. I say it somewhat sarcastically, but it was radical here. But the basic expectations had already been set for regular monthly informal conversations, dialogues, to make sure there is that happening across the board. And we had the good fortune that program was already well advanced and in momentum, or had the momentum, that in the months of January and February, right before COVID hit, every single supervisor in Missouri state government went through a full day of training on how to be a better coach. So it was a huge investment of time and energy, and I'm so glad that we were able to get that done right before COVID hit, because that has been one of the kind of backbones of a common vocabulary, common approach, common frameworks, common ways of having conversations for feedback and professional development across all of our supervisors. And so while much has not been able to go on in person, we also have to remember that, 60% of, at least in Missouri, our workforce is in person every day. We have people in mental institutions, prisons, et cetera. So a significant amount is still in person. But I just note that luckily we're continuing on, we're adapting, but we had that significant investment right before the onset of the COVID disruption to our normal operations, which I think I'm just really glad that we had made that investment.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys were able to keep and accelerate because you were already really working on this and really thinking about it. So we're going to go to Lisa. Drew talked about things about monthly check-ins, informal, teaching people how to be coaches. Is that what you're seeing around the country? What are you seeing?
A couple of things that we've done, both at my company and Accenture, and I've seen elsewhere, is we've also had a number of leadership sessions where we've had leaders hold, lunch hours, happy hours, coffee breaks, etc., to build, a network that can lead to, more relationships. We've kind of lost the opportunity to do in-person networking, and so. I myself hosted a couple of sessions where, we had 6 or 8 people sign up and they were sequential. So I was able to get to know some people within our organization that I wouldn't necessarily speak to. And I think that's a natural way, an organic way to build mentee-mentor relationships, on a virtual level. We've also had opportunities we've seen opportunities where, I'm trying to encourage my teams to spend more time with their teams one-on-one, because I do think not only from a professional development perspective, given COVID and people balancing so many different things from a personal level, it's important to give our teams an opportunity to share what's going on, both personally and professionally. And I think that just deepens and cultivates the relationship and can lead to a long-term mentorship opportunity that maybe you didn't think existed before. So I actually see a very positive shift in this, one-on-one connectedness with the onset of COVID-19. It's actually really refreshing to see. And, if you can have, set up and kind of foster that environment of connectedness, I think it's something that we can continue to encourage.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent point on this networks, really having to be intentional about building those informal networks now that we're all in this virtual space. So now we're going to shift from mentoring and training over to performance evaluations. And so this one's going to go to Drew and to Bob. What was your approach to performance evaluations before COVID? Has it changed at all during this time where you have to give a lot more empathy to your staff for everything else that's going on? So Drew, tell us about Missouri's.
This is kind of the part 2 of the Engage process that I talked about. So a big centerpiece of it was the coaching element and building upon some things that we've been doing for the last few years. And I just also want to note that I do think there's this unique opportunity of the challenges at this point in time for, quite frankly, people to be a bit more human in the workplace out of necessity. And I do think, again, that's an opportunity where people know each other in a way better now, even after they may have worked together 5 or 10 years before, but these last 5 months have altered that dynamic. So I just want to emphasize, again, I do think there's an opportunity. But the other part of Engage, our rollout of Engage 2.0 here, and it continued on pace, was introduction of a new evaluation process, a new performance evaluation process. Again, this was done in partnership with Deloitte, but a huge investment across the entire state government, over 2,000 people involved in the design, piloting. But basically, we have a system in place now where people are evaluated quarterly, a very simple set of a few very pointed questions. It is easy for supervisors to do on an app, but also provide like what are the top 3 development opportunities for folks. That is done on a quarterly basis to accumulate the data through time, much better than on an annual process. And also we have the opportunity for multiple supervisors to offer perspectives on individuals, which also helps in a variety of ways. And another one of the parts of the informal process, in doing so, we also opened it up to optional upward feedback, which is a pretty radical notion here. And what we've seen, though, this rollout took place this spring. We've gone through a few of the quarters. What's great to see is that the vast majority of departments, 100% of their supervisors have been completing it. It's only, our overall completion rate on a quarterly basis around 97%. And on the optional upward feedback that, quite frankly, the supervisors are really eager for. And again, there was some skepticism at first, but now that it's happening, we're looking at probably about 48 to 50% of people offering voluntary upward feedback to their supervisors, which is really awesome to see. And that folds into then the regular monthly dialogues. But so we're in the process of rolling this out. This is the first year, but through the hard work of so many people across multiple departments, we actually haven't missed a beat, even in the context of this COVID challenge.
Thank you so much, Drew. So Bob, to what you guys are saying around performance evaluations, Drew touched on that upward performance evaluations, the 360 performance evaluations, quarterly performance evaluations. Is that what you're seeing with people around the nation?
I wish it was. I have to say Missouri and a few other states are the exception to this. So those of you who are not doing this don't feel so bad. You're probably more in the majority. What I'm hearing across the country is not a lot different from what I experienced when I first joined Tennessee's state government as CAO a few years ago. Lots of governments are still not realizing the full potential of their performance management programs. The best examples I'm finding suggest they shouldn't be considered as a necessary evil or just an opportunity to help employees better perform, but also as an opportunity to achieve higher levels of performance as a system. What I've also noticed is, unfortunately, many governments across the country jumped into telework head first without implementing new policies and modified processes. So as Laura alluded to, programs like performance management, training have taken a back seat and have not been brought to date with those current work practices. So supervisors are going to have to figure out how to manage the performance as well as the expectations and needs of their staff that they can't always see face to face now. Employees who are teleworking need to know their performance is still being measured consistently with years past. And as well as the program is going to evolve or has evolved to align not only with what they're doing now, but also how and where they're currently doing that work. A few more observations on why I believe PM programs need to improve and what needs to be included. As Jamie, you mentioned the NASCA Job One research study project last year, that survey confirmed the public sector is not winning its competition for talent with the private sector. It also found that job security and benefits are the top two motivators of those working in the public sector. So given that and the current fiscal crisis, it's only natural employees want more certainty around their employment. And with state budgets tightening, the public sector is likely to find it even more challenging to attract and retain qualified applicants. So while it's obvious, and as we've talked about empathy several times on this program already, that's important. So providing your employees with nurturing communication in general and specifically about their performance and career path will really go a long way. Unfortunately, the challenge is close to half of public sector employees say their expectations around performance reviews are not being met. There's definitely a need for improvement. And our research also confirmed that career advancement can be a great opportunity to attract and retain employees in the public sector, as employees see a direct connection between setting goals and preparing career development plans with their own career advancement. So in addition to providing more clarity to employees, best-in-class programs are providing a roadmap to advancement along with the essential skills and training programs needed to build in their necessary competencies. But here again, only about half of public sector workers currently say they have a clear understanding of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors they need to move up within the organization. So in preparing for this, I wanted to kind of give you or offer three strategies that I see most commonly associated with great performance management programs across the country. First, they are consistently structured, implemented, and measured enterprise-wide and have the full support of the government's top leadership and labor unions. These programs, as Drew alluded to, include the formal evaluation process where the employee and supervisor co-create goals and have multiple engaging collaborative meetings throughout the year. And they also have an equally meaningful coaching and mentoring program, providing regular and informal feedback throughout the year. Second, they align individual and departmental goals with those of the governor and other departments for greater system-wide efficiencies, effectiveness, and outcomes. And third, they address their employees' career development and advancement needs.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you so much for also talking about the research, because we spent so much time last year really looking at the research, and we're really excited in October to launch the full report, as well as recommendations around training and performance evaluation and succession planning. So we have about a few more minutes. We're going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to go to breakout. So everyone who's listening, get excited to go into small group breakouts. So we've got 2 more questions. This one's going to go to Laura and Lisa, and something that we've heard that's been really important about creating an inclusive culture. So Laura, we'll go to you first. We're now doing remote work. How can states create this cohesive, collaborative, inclusive culture?
You know, within administration, I think Teams meetings and Teams chat are very much normalized now. And, you know, we just, as an example, in building the state budget, we just got done ranking enterprise-wide IT investments. And we asked our IT staff to put that all into a Teams setting. And we had 8 or 10 different department directors ranking these, myself included. And they did it, and they put it all on Teams, and you read all the documents, and then you score your IT projects. And we asked the IT staff for feedback, and they said it was pretty uniformly positive. So we're getting more cross-departmental usage of Teams. And you know, our administration is co-located with other departments on a relatively limited basis. We still do see other staff from other departments you know, in that sort of by the way, in the lobby or in the hallway. So we have some of that still, but certainly not as much as before. Within the department, again, you know, more frequent online touch base helps a lot. And for creating cohesion internally, for me, obviously, it's about constant communication, just like it would be in a non-pandemic setting. I mean, my favorite part of my job is sending my once a week all department email. And it's a very important task for me because there's always something happening at the governor's office, emergency operations center with COVID response. And we just got done with a special session of the legislature to cut the budget. And so, you know, the staff deserves to know all of that stuff, and they deserve to know what's coming up, and they deserve to be reminded that they're part of a greater whole. And so, you know, that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And also thank you so much for teaching me how to say Nevada.
Nevada, yes.
We are really excited.
Welcome. Now you can run for president.
As have you as part of the NASCA team, so welcome, one of the newest members. And then so we'll go to Lisa. Is that kind of inclusion, creating an inclusive, cohesive team? What are you saying?
Well, certainly I think we've seen in our research and, you know, in any sort of talent management, attracting and maintaining a workforce, culture is a big component of that. And so I think, you know, we have a great opportunity to increase the level of communication and freedom and, you know, flexibility in public sector through this new way of working, frankly. You know, I currently work with the state of Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts, and we've seen a tremendous uptick in morale. And, you know, we've conducted many releases over the last few months, completely remote. And we've definitely demonstrated our ability to work together and, you know, continue to deliver quality as a team. And it's, you know, pretty remarkable, I'd say. The things that I would say are important is making sure that your staff understands that you do trust them to know what the work is and to get the work done and not feel as though we're micromanaging folks out in the field. Certainly you need to have that communication and touch points, but it doesn't need to be in excess. Enabling them through the right technologies, Microsoft Teams, Skype, whatever it may be. Laura talked a lot about that. That's important. And then lastly, I would just say focusing on flexibility. As we've talked about, there's such a need to be more human and just come across, as very compassionate. Everyone's dealing with different things on a personal level, whether it's health or family or friends. And so, work is one aspect of that. Of course, that's our mission and our objective, but we also, I think, have a duty, and I think it's important for us to recognize that our staff are also people that, need support and care too. So that's what, I've seen. That's what I've tried to emulate across my teams, across both my clients and Accenture teams. So hopefully that will sustain as we move forward here. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll also hear from you as we come back out of the breakouts. So Bob and Drew, final question. One, what are the tools and tactics, or what have we missed? What's your final bow to this panel today? So first we will go to Drew.
Well, so much has already been said, so many great insights. I'll just quickly add this one for everyone, which is fight for the long term of future of your workforce. What I mean by that is when it came to our budget review that we just went through and we had to make significant reductions, the one thing that historically happened as an example is that there'd be kind of a peanut butter cut across many of the quote unquote back office support, and that would include investments in training and professional development. That at least was the history here in the state of Missouri. And I just want to use that as an example where we, with the governor's support, we made a very deliberate decision that despite many difficult decisions that were being made, we would not cut the department's budgets for professional development. And so I use that as, so not $1 was cut, and so we're maintaining our investments in things such as our LinkedIn Learning for every state employee. Every state team member has 24/7 access to LinkedIn Learning, which we call here Mo Learning. It's a broader learning management platform. But a series of things like that, we made the deliberate decision that we were not going to step backwards because we had made consistent investments. We'd seen the lessons of the past, and that oftentimes there are shocks to the system that take 5 or more years to dig yourself out of the hole. So that is why we just continued on path with our strategic investments. So that would be my kind of parting perspective, which is even in this situation, continue to look long-term, view it as an opportunity, and fight for that in some of those tough trade-off decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. That's huge, not cutting professional development and training. So congratulations to your team on that. Bob, final bow before we go into breakouts. Final thoughts.
Thanks. I'll try to be quick. A couple things I haven't heard discussed today that this has shown a light on, I guess. We certainly have heard HR's had to pivot and they've had to reassign a lot of the workforce to other areas. And so that's brought the need to have a better understanding of skills assessment across the workforce. And I think that's something that's been lacking. So how do we know who has the skills to be able to reassign them to other areas, and how do we know we're hiring the right people going forward? So that's one area. And it's also been, it's raised the issue of a lot of times there's not been a single agency officially responsible for certain activities like telework policies, and even workforce planning. So I think that's reinforcing the need for leadership to realize that HR can bring more to the table. So that's a great opportunity. And we've also seen in these decentralized organizations, customers coming back to big HR saying, we need some help. We need more tools and resources, standards, policies, automated processes, things like that. So this is giving many central HR agencies a look behind the curtain to see what's going on and help them address the quantity, quality, and levels of performance of the decentralized customers HR are offering. So I think as a result of this, we're going to come out stronger and have a better solution for the enterprise.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lisa. This has been an extremely informative panel. We learned about empathy. We learned about upward coaching. We learned about in-person training that's happening in a social distance way. We've learned about constant performance evaluation and monthly check-in. So thank you. We are so excited to launch our final recommendations and research later in the fall. You'll see that coming out later in the year.